you should not get into any kind of committed relationship until you've healed. Hi, trauma healer. The mistake that a lot of us make is that we try and get into a relationship. We have the Disney movie concept of relationships. We think we're going to find our Prince Charming or our beautiful damsel in distress, and that they will rescue us, they will complete us. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Thinking back to my relationship history, in my past, I did have some wonderful relationships, and I had some very challenging, painful relationships. And the pattern that I noticed is that if I was just kind of like so about a girl, I had a good time but not fully in love with her, then I was fine. But if it was that special someone and I was in love, all of a sudden all kinds of problems would happen and my trauma would be triggered. And the reason is because I had this subconscious story based on my childhood. I was taken away from my parents at a year old and put in these little children's houses. My earliest memory is running around in the middle of the night and trying to get home because I'd wake up in the middle of the night and the person who was supposed to be watching the kids was asleep and I'd be running around. And that's my earliest memory, is just being terrified, thinking I was abandoned. So I created this subconscious story that love means abandonment, because obviously I loved my parents were everything, and I just felt that I was abandoned. And so what would happen is if I was really in love, I would have all kinds of anxiety come up, and the abandonment wounding would really come up, and I would frankly sometimes act like a needy, wimpy jackass, and then I would get dumped. And what would happen is it became a self-fulfilling prophecy that I was abandoned. And so, it took a lot of healing work to figure out that pattern, because I used to blame the other person. I couldn't understand. I was like, hey, I treat her well, I'm kind, I'm there for her. But it wasn't that I was necessarily doing anything wrong. It was just the energy that I was conveying was like really needy, really like needy, wanty. I need you to save me. I can't be happy if you're not with me. And that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. And so my relationships didn't improve until I went on this healing journey. And I'll give you a caveat. You don't have to be 100% healed to get into a long-term committed relationship. You just need to be substantially on that path. You have to at least healed, processed, dealt with a large amount of your trauma. Because if not, like I said, what will happen is the same thing that happened to me, is relationships, intimate relationships, are actually the most triggering of any type of relationship, because it brings up all kinds of patterns from your childhood. And the other thing is, especially if you grew up in unhealthy relationship dynamics, like your parents were fighting all the time, or there was infidelity, or even abuse, all those patterns are within you. And unfortunately, if you don't heal, or at least do some substantial healing, then all of those patterns can get triggered. And sometimes, your partner could say something innocuous, but your brain, your subconscious brain, will tie it to something that happened in your childhood amongst your parents that wasn't innocuous, and your brain misinterprets a situation, and then you're triggered and you flip out. And that's not fair to your partner, and it could lead to fighting and all kinds of misunderstanding, and ultimately the end of the relationship. So the key is first to evaluate your patterns. If you're having one failed relationship after the other, and you're noticing a common theme, you can't always blame the other person. Oftentimes, it's something within you that needs to be healed. Now, that's not to justify if anybody mistreats you. Nobody should be mistreated or abused. But you got to understand that oftentimes you wouldn't even be in a relationship with somebody who's mistreating you if you've done the healing work. Because the other thing is, from childhood, chaos and fighting, that could be, even though you might not like it, that could be what you're used to from your childhood. So you do need to process and heal that, or else, one relationship after the other is not going to work out. Or even if you are together for a long time, by the way, the length of a relationship doesn't mean it's a successful relationship. There's people who are in relationships for years and they're very unhappy. They're fucking miserable. And I've been there, so I know what that's like too. So the key is you have to put your healing first. Don't put getting into a relationship first. There's, especially for traumatized people, there's lots of love addiction, there's lots of sex addiction, and other behavioral addictions. And the root of addiction is to try and self-soothe your internal pain. If you've healed your internal pain, or at least gone far down the road of healing, then you won't seek that temporary pain relief in a relationship. And you'll notice red flags. You'll be a lot less likely to put up with nonsense. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be given chances and you shouldn't communicate, but if you set a boundary, and for example, hey, I don't like being screamed at. If you have an issue with me, you can always discuss it with me, but please don't yell at me. And if your partner keeps yelling at you, you give them a couple of chances, and if they keep doing it, that's it, hit the road. And I can tell you that if you've healed, that being scared of being alone or just being used to being mistreated, that's not going to keep you in an unhealthy relationship anymore. And eventually you'll meet that right person. You'll meet that healthy person who's also either well-adjusted or on the healing journey as well, and they will treat you the way you deserve to be treated. So you have to understand that there's no shortcuts. You can't get into a relationship expecting the other person to heal you. Now, what is important though is to meet a person who's into healing, into self-development, and then you can be on the journey together and you can help each other meet each other's needs interdependently, not codependently. It means you're not relying on the person for your healing, you're not relying on the other person for your happiness, but you can do the work together and discuss certain issues that you've been through and help each other heal, instead of doing the opposite, getting triggered and attacking each other and getting in fights and basically re-traumatizing each other. And there's a great metaphor from a book called The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz, and I highly recommend that you read that book. And what he talks about is that we all basically have psychic wounds all over our bodies, from our childhood mainly, and that even though we want love with our partner, they're basically touching us right in our wounds, and it hurts, and then we get upset and angry and all that, and there's fights. So the key is heal those wounds, and then when you're touched, it's not going to hurt, and you're not going to get into arguments that, again, a lot of these arguments aren't even based on what's happening in the present. It's based on unhealed trauma and other issues from the past on both sides. So please put your healing first. And once you feel that you've done a great amount of healing, and one of the ways that you'll know is the things that triggered you in the past, that really upset you in the past, I'm not saying that you're going to like them, but they aren't going to cause the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. You might not like them, but you'll still be centered and grounded and be able to evaluate things objectively. So again, please put your healing first. And once you've done a good amount of healing, then you can look to get into a healthy, committed relationship. Until next time, I wish you well on your healing path, and we'll chat again soon.